As I recall, we had three platoons. We had a scout platoon, a weapons platoon, and a lift platoon.
The National Guard unit has always had its ups and downs. You know, funding has been a major problem over the years, that they would take away our additional flight training periods.
We had a very big struggle at the start, and it was primarily oriented to the equipment, the lack of equipment that would do the job.
There was times that we weren't sure that we were even going to keep our aircraft.
We continue to be challenged by the fact that we have an Apache MTOW with no Apaches, because I looked out there and I could see the disappointment in the individual soldiers and the aviators.
But the pilots loved to fly, even though we didn't really have a viable mission because of the equipment shortages, but we were able to overcome that when we got bigger and better aircraft. And so there was always a horizon in front of us that we could see and we were promised, and that's what we looked forward to keep the morale up.
When we said we were going to get the new units to the Apaches, we realized that the training system, the RTEP manuals that we've been operating under in the past, they were terrible. We were going to have to go to a new system and actually learn combat skills for each individual soldier all the way over again, and we're not going to wear our flight suits, and we're not have drills where we don't fly. We're going to actually do soldier skill stuff.
All of a sudden they went from having very low morale to high morale. The challenge was on of the logistics and the training and the maintenance to get everything ready to go.
We started losing Hueys. It was kind of sad. But what's exciting at that time is that they said, you're going to get these Blackhawks. And Blackhawks is a pretty amazing airplane to fly.
As I remember, there was nothing but the bird dogs and the small helicopters, the H-23 helicopters. And we'd go to summer camp, and I'd be in the Vauxhall out there or something, and I'd see these guys fly over. And I knew at that time that I wanted to get out of the dirt and get in the air. So, well, each of the squadron headquarters had the L-19 bird dogs. First, second, third, we had third squadron then, down in Pocatello. Second squadron, I think, was in Twin Falls, and the first squadron in Caldwell. And they each had aviation sections in their battalion headquarters, squadron headquarters. We did several things with the L-19s. We did, of course, spotting, convoy control. When the battalions and the squadrons would come to summer camp at Gowan Field, L-19s would provide convoy control for those as they moved down the highways and interstates of Idaho to get to Boise. Back when we had the aviation elements out in the squadron and battalion headquarters, our accident rate was very high. And the Guard Bureau determined that that was caused by lack of good management and lack of, basically those battalion commanders and staff were not aviation oriented out in those areas very much. And the aviation people just flew. Basically, that's what they did. They kind of organized their own flights and assigned their own aircraft and made their own missions and everything. And as a result, the accident rate and the maintenance of the aircraft was pretty deplorable out there in some cases. So the Guard Bureau decided to get a handle on that. They needed to consolidate the aircraft and get them under a management program. And that's also about the time that the Army Aviation Support Facility came into being, when the aviation company was formed, and they consolidated the aircraft. So. Well, yeah, when the aviation company was formed, as I recall, we only had the L-19s, we had a Diavolon Beaver, and we had the B model and C model Hiller helicopters. That was our aviation structure, and that's all we had in the Idaho National Guard with those. And we got our first aircraft that would haul our aviation company lift people, our infantry, out to the objective. That was the CH-34. And they had enough power, and it would take, you could put 16 soldiers in the CH-34. So that gave the aviation company their first capability to lift their infantry platoon out to the objective.
Yeah, they just made the transition from C-34s to Mike models, the Mike model type gunship with the M21 subsystem or the M5 subsystem.
I got to tell you, the first notification that we're going to get Hueys was an exciting thing. From the Adjutant General and the governor of the state on down. Had to do quite a lot of maintenance on that aircraft after it got up to Boise, because the active Army, when they knew they was going to lose it, they quit working on it. And then we just started getting trickled in different models. We got the D model, and then we got the H model Hueys, and then picked up the Mike models with the bigger, wider blades, and put the guns on it. And
At the time I came to Idaho, it was a air troop, 116th Armed Cav Regiment, and it was a Huey lift platoon. We had a Huey lift platoon, an Aero Scout platoon, and a gun platoon in that unit.
it was actually a thing called the air troop. It just had, they had to have a TO&E name for it. Flying the Huey was just like I said, flying the L-19. You just put it on like a glove, and after, 500 or 600 hours in it, you really get to where you can employ it.
Oh yeah, Hueys are easy aircraft to fly. Everybody needs to have flown the Huey at one time or another.
The Huey was a very stable platform, probably the easiest aircraft I'd ever flown, which includes, the OH-58 was probably the most difficult aircraft I flew as far as piloting skills, and also the AH-64. But by far, the UH-1 was the easiest one to actually fly.
You could feel the airplane. It talked to you. You could understand the way that the operation of the helicopter was going. If it was a hot day, you'd have X amount of power. If it was a cool day, you'd have more. It was just a fun airplane to fly, and very reliable, very dependable.
Oh, the miniguns. The miniguns are the best part of the aircraft, and firing the rockets was fun. It was a little bit different. We had very, very highly qualified instructor pilots, and in fact, all the members of that platoon were top-notch. We fired the rockets, funny enough, with grease pencil marks on the windshield. We'd pull in, and refuel and rearm was as professional as you probably see it right now with the H-64, but the aircraft come in, we do hot refuel, no issues. The unheralded FARP guys would always be there and ready to go, and they'd be off on their own like they are now, and you could count on them to have fuel and put fuel in.
Usually have 4 points. We'd have a Huey come out and drop blivets of fuel and the pumps and everything. They'd set up like 4 points. You'd come in hot refueling. The pilot in command, usually in the left seat, would stay in the aircraft, leave it at normal operating. The right seater would get out along with the crew chief, and they'd fill the aircraft up. And then we had a series of hand signs, getting shorter, cut it off, and we'd have to report how much gas we took and things like that.
I believe in 1992, we transferred from air cab to the 183rd.
Mr. Roberts probably has a pretty good history. I think he was the one that helped us. We did kind of a staffing on the original design of the first 183rd patch and getting Avis Prey Day approved, because it was birds of prey, and we of course have the birds of prey here in our training area. At that time, the transition to the H-64, what we had was there was 7 states, and Arizona and Idaho were the last 2 states.
And then, of course, we got the UH-60 Blackhawks at about the same time and started letting the Mike models go.
What I recall from very first hearing that we were going to be receiving the H-64 and the UH-60 was people were surprised, I think a little bit apprehensive because they didn't really know what to expect.
And we had to do what we called swapping of quotas, and National Guard will allow us to do the swapping of the quotas. So we tried to work with each one of the aviators, our MD especially, to make sure they got the dates they wanted to go down to the H-64 transition.
Well, the transition was a big deal for the pilots. To be front to rear, you couldn't pass stuff back and forth. Now everything was communications through your intercom system.
To getting all the crews through, it was about a year. And then of course we had a timeline, a comprehensive timeline on how we were going to get from where we were to going through the unit training fielding down at Fort Hood, Texas.
And they were flying 7 days a week, dusk dawn and then beyond, trying to get everybody qualified in the 64 because we didn't know how long the war was going to go on in the Middle East. And then of course the maintenance was quite technical. I mean, to go from a proven aircraft design in the H model and the Mike model to an aircraft as technically advanced as the H-64, there was a lot of transition training.
You know, phase 1 was getting everybody through their transitions. That not included the aviators, but we also had all the maintenance personnel that had to go get off to their schools. And
The maintenance guys, I can only say that I thought that when we went to the Black Hawk, the modular maintenance and the way things worked, I thought it maybe was a transition period that was difficult because they didn't know the aircraft as good as they did the Hueys and the 58s, but they came through it swimmingly.
So in 2011-2012 timeframe, we started the process of turning in our alpha models so that they could go back to the factory, be completely stripped down to their frames, inspected, and then built back into being a Delta model. And so it was exciting to get an aircraft with the latest and greatest technology. One of the big challenges with our transition was the announcement that we were going to deploy. We weren't all the way through our transition to Delta models. We still had a lot of pilots to qualify, a lot of crew chiefs to qualify and to progress. And having an impending mobilization put a lot of pressure on us to get those things done fast.
ARI was probably nothing short of a sneak attack, and to say that it's been difficult, convoluted, confusing would be an understatement. We were not able to make the cut for the original recommendation for 4 attack battalions to stay in the National Guard structure, and based off the information we had and other senior leaders made a decision that Idaho would decisively move out and engage a new mission set for Idaho that would include securing a couple different MTOs were discussed. One was the GSAB, the other one was the Assault Battalion. Idaho elected and thought it was a better fit that we would become an Assault Battalion. Around the May timeframe of 2016, Idaho began going and picking up UH-60 Alphas and Limas that had been phased out of the active duty and moving those to Idaho.
We've had the Apache since 1992, and in that time we've done some incredible things with the Apaches. We've done NTC rotations, we've done JRTC rotations, we've gone to Bosnia, we've gone to Canada, we've gone to Afghanistan.
Still, maybe some people are still grappling with, you know, the impacts of the Aviation Restructure Initiative. I would say just kind of look past all of that, knowing that you're part of a quality organization that has gone through change before, will probably go through change in the future, and just realize that the quality and the people of this organization are better than ARI, and we're going to get through this. We're going to move on down the road. We're going to look back and, you know, years and years ahead and see how far we've come, and know that Idaho will always be a professional Army aviation organization.
There was always a horizon in front of us that we could see and we were promised, and that's what we looked forward to keep the morale up.